Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of Small Business Big Leadership with myself, Odette de Beer, and my guest, Christo Pretorius. Today we are going to talk about leadership capacity. Oh my goodness, what a word. There is just so much in there. First, the question is, what is leadership capacity? Christo, what are we talking about?
G'day, Odette. Once again, thank you for having me on your podcast. Really appreciate it. Yeah, leadership capacity. I believe it's really the ability or the size of your potential when it comes to leadership. Every person on this planet looks different. We've got different characteristics. We've got different heights, weight, the way we look, and we all have different capacities. To be a leader, that natural ability or that natural inclination towards taking charge and helping people grow into the person that they can become. So yeah, that's what capacity really means. It's that the amount of substance that you carry as a leader.
So I love this because it speaks about two things. It speaks about the fact that there is something that you already have that you can pour out, but it also speaks about the fact that you could potentially increase your capacity. There can be more than what there is at the moment. Is that right?
Absolutely. There is definitely more. Everybody has an amount of pouring into people, but you can definitely increase that. Every person upon this planet has a leadership capacity, and absolutely, there are certain things that you can do, that you can use, that you can work on to increase that capacity and become a greater leader or a better leader or a more influential leader, a more impactful leader, whatever area you want to increase in. So absolutely.
So I think the first place that leaders need to start with, if they haven't done so already, is obviously understand what their current capacity is. As a leader, we need to become self-aware, and we need to increase our awareness of ourselves, not in the sense of being self-absorbed, but being aware of our impact we have on the people around us and the way that we respond as opposed to react. So what are some of the things you suggest leaders can do to increase their awareness or to understand where they are at the moment? Because there's no point in saying, I want to grow my capacity if I don't know what my current capacity is.
Yeah. Introspection and probably, self-awareness. I think those are important things. The question then is, how do you become self-aware? But yeah, I think those two things are important. I like to ask questions, and so I think questions holds the answer, to what we need. And so, first of all, I would start by asking a couple of questions, to myself, or even, let the people that I'm leading, answer some of these questions. I've got a couple of them, and maybe we can go through some of them, and we can just elaborate on them. If you want to write them down, and let your team ask them, or ask your people around you, that will really help. I think first of all, are you capable of taking initiative, and leading projects or leading people? Do you have that natural inclination of leading people and taking initiative? Many times we expect the people around us to just know certain things. But as a leader, if we don't have those type of characteristics, it's not really going to duplicate or even, be imparted down into the people that we are leading and that we are working with. So are you capable of taking initiative, and leading the people? I like what Simon Sinek says about leadership. He says leadership is not about being in charge, but it's about taking care of those within your charge. So do you have this ability to lead? Because that's what leadership really is in leading people, is you are taking responsibility for those people that are around you. And if you don't have that natural inclination towards that, that's something that you got to work on, Yeah. I think to be a great leader, and the question would probably also be like, what is a leader? I mean, everybody has a definition of that, but in my aspect, I'm a really really focus on being servant leader, lead by example. And so I think if we ask this question, do we have that capacity? Are we capable of taking initiative and leading, certain projects, and leading the people, that's a very good place to start.
So
Do you?
what happens if you ask yourself that question? Because that's question number one. But what happens if I go, well, I'm unsure. I don't know if I'm capable. I mean, I may absolutely love taking charge because I'm just bossy, but does that mean I'm capable? Because those are not the same things.
Well, yeah, I suppose you need to determine that then. What I tend to do is I look at it from a practical perspective, and so I would just look at my day or look at my week and do some self-reflection and see some of the problems, some of the situations that arose. Did I take the lead? Did I take the initiative in doing that? Um, and it comes down to speaking about being bossy, or having the capacity to lead or being capable. You got to speak to the people around you. If those people see you as bossy, then fair enough. Then maybe that's not, you don't have the capability to take initiative. You're just a boss. You just want to tell people what to do. And I think there's a big difference between telling people what to do and actually leading people. Can you go first?
Absolutely.
So once again, it goes hand in hand with yourself asking those questions, but also the people around you, getting some feedback from those people. I see it many times. Even this week, I was speaking to some leaders, and I just gave them some examples where, it's easy when people tell you what to do, but they've never been there themselves. And when people do that, Odette, when people tell other people what to do without them having done it themselves, what happens is they set unrealistic expectations. Because you yourself don't know what it takes to fulfill that task, yet you want it done. And so it creates unrealistic expectations. And so if you speak to your team and you find out or you realize that, people feel that you're very hard on them, people feel like, they can never please you, the things that you expect of them are unattainable, then it's possible that you're bossy. It's possible that you simply tell people what you do and you're not leading them in that aspect. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you. I think something we also need to consider is part of understanding our capacity is exactly what you just said, but I want to drive the point home. It's about being curious. You don't have to have a list of questions. While this list of questions is probably going to hit the nail straight on the head, but be curious about your environment. Be curious about how things happen at home. Be curious about your team. I was listening to someone and they said, actually, you know what really matters is going to your leader, your team, or your spouse and saying, what would make this work for you, or what would make this the best day ever, and not assume that because I think quite often we as leaders, as human beings, we think we are supposed to have the answer. The truth is, leaders are not leaders because they have the answers. Leaders are leaders because they're willing to take people on a journey which sometimes requires courage. That's what makes you a leader. It's saying, well, I don't have the answer, but I'm willing to take this step of faith and I'm willing to walk this road of courage and figure it out as we go. It's not about having the answer. So in terms of understanding your leadership capacity and growing it, it's really about becoming curious about who you are, how you respond. And I want to encourage you, if you feel like I don't have capacity or I don't have the capability, that's okay. It's an awareness that you've created. And if this is something that you want, you can build it.
Definitely. I like what you said there. You're charting a course, you're taking that step of faith to lead people towards a certain, destination. John Maxwell says something interesting. He says, if you think you're leading, but nobody is following, you're simply taking a walk.
Yes.
And so here's a good thing for you to, once again, trying to drive this point home of, am I just being bossy? Is, ask your people, ask the people that you are leading, or try and find ways to ask this question, maybe even without them knowing, is what projects or what aspects would they do voluntary for you without them having to do it because you're the boss or you're the leader? Would those people follow you if you don't pay them? Would those
Yes.
people follow you if there's nothing in it for them? Do they believe in you as the person in the front? I think that's a good way to determine that as well. But it's so true what you're saying. It's that you got to be curious. You got to be willing to be vulnerable. If you ask these questions, you have to be vulnerable. Self-reflection, self-discovery. You got to be vulnerable. You got to allow yourself to be vulnerable, and you got to be willing to take the negative criticism that might come. When people tell you, "Oh, but I don't think you're leading. I think you're just telling us what to do. I think you're just being a dictator, or you're just being bossy." It takes a lot of maturity to be able to be vulnerable.
Yes,
and I
it
believe
does.
being vulnerable, you buy so much credit, you buy so much trust
Yes.
with people. It's something that many years ago I was doing a leadership session with a group of people, and I asked them, what is a leader? What do you think is the characteristics of a leader? And one of the people said, it's the person that knows all the answers. And I was like, that's a myth. Because a leader,
Then that's
exactly,
not me.
Then I'm not a leader, exactly. You don't have all the answers. It's a myth. You don't have to have all the answers to lead.
No.
I think John Maxwell said something like this during COVID. He says it's fine for leaders to be uncertain. It's fine for leaders to be uncertain. We just can't be unclear.
Yes.
And so,
I love that.
it's fine when we say, listen, I don't know. I don't know how this thing's going to work out, but this is what we're going to do.
Yes.
A leader is definitely not somebody that has all the answers and knows what to do every time. We're all growing, we're all working towards that.
I love that. That's 100% true. So one of the other questions that you've got to share with our listeners is, do you feel comfortable delegating tasks to others? Now, that's an interesting one, because entrepreneurs and small business owners love to own everything. So tell us a little bit about that question. How do we as entrepreneurs and business owners bridge that gap?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's maybe a double-edged sword there. It's about the fact that, yes, you want to be in control. As an entrepreneur, you want to take charge of everything. There's that saying, maybe we should not even say it's a saying, but if you want something done, do it yourself. I suppose in certain areas, you just got to do it. I suppose maybe this is where it comes in, is that when you start as an entrepreneur, you are there on your own. There's nobody else. So you have to do everything, which is great. It needs to come that transition then, where you start into trusting people, start stepping into delegating, start stepping into getting people that are better than you at certain things, and allowing them to do that and to flourish. So I think it's probably that natural, I have to take charge. It's my responsibility. I need to build this. And so that's something that we got to work on as we grow and develop as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and start trusting people. But,
I think you just raised a really good point. Sorry, you've just raised a really good point. A couple of minutes earlier, you said that it's okay for you to be uncertain. It's not okay for you to be unclear. And I think the reason it's so hard to delegate is because most often business owners are unclear. I read a quote by someone who I admire greatly, and they said, business coaches, don't worry that AI will take over your job, because that requires for business owners to be clear and know what they want. And it's 100% true. But that also speaks to our leadership capacity. If we do not possess the ability to clearly articulate anything, we can't delegate and we can't lead.
Yep. That is true. That is so true. I like what you said there, because if there's not clarity, let's speak about vision. Is there not clarity? What's vision? Vision is simply to have the ability to see something, that others don't see. You see further and better than others, and so exactly, if you want to ask people to do something without clarity, they're not going to know how to do it, or they're going to do it their way, and you're not going to be happy with the result, and that's not what I expected. Expectation.
Well, what you expected was unclear.
expectation plus reality equals conflict. If you're not clear on your expectation, the reality is that you're not going to be happy with that, So true, and it comes down to trust, it comes down to know your team. It's come down to know your people. Once again, I truly I'm just fascinated by the importance of spending time with the people around you, getting to know those people, understand their strengths, understand their weaknesses, understand how they do things, understand the way they see things. It is so important because that's going to determine how quickly you can adapt, how quickly you can make decisions, how quickly your team is going to respond in certain situations. If you know you can back this person next to you. When we look at sport, I'm a big fan of sport. I used to play rugby and cricket, at school. And if you look at especially rugby, and even like you look at the World Cup winning teams over the years, probably in every final or one of the majority or one of the major moments within a game, somebody would pass the ball to the person next to them without even looking. They just know that person is there because they have practiced that certain move for so many times. There's this awareness that I know my team is around me and where they're at. And because of that, they can move with speed. They can move with certainty. So it's really important to create that clarity and it's your responsibility to make certain that people know exactly what we are doing. Delegating for me, Odette, and this is the reason why I put this in, is because I've seen it so many times where people misunderstand the difference between delegating and dumping authority or dumping responsibility. It is my responsibility to do something, but I don't like it, so I'm going to just give it to somebody else, and I think it's delegating. Delegating a task doesn't mean that you're no longer responsible. Make sure that the outcome still takes place. As a matter of fact, I think it's necessary that you still follow it through and still make sure that the people that you are delegating it to are capable in doing that, So delegating is very, very important within an organization because you can't do everything yourself, like you said earlier. But if you're just going to dump responsibility on people that are incapable of doing that or unsure in doing that or don't have the resources to do that, those tasks maybe are not gonna get done. And it speaks to your leadership. I truly believe that it speaks to your leadership.
Absolutely. It speaks to your ability to be clear, but also I think a lot of it comes down to empathy. If we have empathy for the people that we work with, then we connect with them. And only when we connect with them and we understand them, can we say, well, it's important for me that you understand what I need from this thing, because collectively we win. But if I don't care about you, I'm going to dump. And I know there are people saying, oh, that's not true. And Odette, you're being so harsh. I know I say very harsh things, but that's honestly the way that I view the world. When we care about somebody, we will go out of our way to train them, to uplift them, to understand what they care about, whether it's a customer, whether it's a client, whether it's an employee, whether it's your spouse. You're not just going to throw things at them. You're going to take the time to teach them. If I think about children, we don't just tell our kids, you go make your bed. We teach them, this is how we make our bed. This is how we do it. You have to do that. Oh, that's tricky. Let me help you. This is how we do it. And the same is true for our employees. I'm not suggesting that we treat our teams like kids, but the same care that you would take when you're training your child to do something should be taken when we're training our teams to do something, because the end result produces profit for the business, which helps you, which helps your employee. So collectively, we need to care about that.
Absolutely. I like what you say, empathy. It's so important. And it's not being, like you said, treating them as children, but it's also not, being soft on the people, and, the environment that I now need to create is I got to consider them, and I consider, 13 aspects before I just ask somebody to do something. That's not, I don't think that's what we're saying at all. Or I know that's not what we're saying at all. We're speaking about your capacity as a leader and growing as a leader. You got to consider these things. You just got to at least look at some of these questions and ask yourself, am I delegating or am I dumping? Am I taking initiative in leading projects, or am I just, bossing people around? Whether or not you change and whether or not you grow in these aspects, it's up to you. But it's simply to consider those things, and it's like, empathy. It's just like putting yourself in somebody else's shoe. Just see it the way that they see it, I know I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Walt Disney, when he built Disney World, he went on his knees. He was crouching, looking at, how the windows needs to look in Disney World, because it was from a kid's perspective, not from an adult's perspective. It wasn't about what he wanted. It's all about the people that are coming, the people that I'm building this for. Will it become for them? And once again, as an entrepreneur, yes, you start out, I'm building this thing. And as it grows and develops, now you got to bring people on board. You got to sell this to people. And, you built this company for people to be a part of that. You have to consider it to a certain degree. What are we building? Why is Google so successful? And I'm not saying everybody should have the Google, methodology, but, the way that they've created their workspace is so employer-centric. And we see it works, and we don't have to go to that extreme. But I do think that, or I know that asking that question at least is vitally important, and showing empathy and compassion, understanding the people that you are leading.
Yes. Success leaves clues. And the honest to goodness truth is, if you want to achieve something spectacular, go to the person that's already done it. See what they've done. You don't have to copy them, but there are principles, exactly like you said. There are principles that they've employed, and your job is to find the principle that you need to employ in the way that works in your business, with your values, with your personality, the DNA of your brand, so that your brand can succeed. So tell us about the rest of the questions. I mean, we had a whole introspection list for leaders. Tell us some more about that list.
Yeah, I want to go down to number 6. Do you communicate effectively, both verbally and in written form? I think we maybe touched on a little bit when you spoke about, that clarity. Communication is important as a leader. You need to make sure that the way that you communicate, when I say verbally and, in written form, it's finding out the people that you're around. How do they perceive, or how do they receive communication? How do they receive instruction? How do you give information over to them? It's really very focused on the people that you are leading, because at the end of the day, you don't want to do things over. It's going to cost you more if we have to redo things. And so we want to communicate it effectively, to the people. Communicating, we've said it many times, is not just about speaking, but it's about listening. It's about understanding the people, that you're around with. And so look at it this way. There are certain people that you can send them a text message or an email, and they understand it. Other people, you got to speak to them. I've many times, typed out an email, and then I'm like, no, please send a voice note, because I can just articulate myself better this way. I'm sure if they're going to read my mail, they're not going to do what I'm expecting them to do. Like, it's just, like, personally for me, I'm not strong on written, form of communication. It doesn't really make sense all the time. So it's much better for me to speak to people, or send them like I said, a voice note. But do you communicate effectively? Do you believe communication is important as a leader, Odette?
I do. So I actually have a thought on that. And obviously I have a thought. I have a thought on everything. But in particular, when it comes to communication, there is the need to be clear and to be effective. But I also think it's important that we pay attention to how we say it. I have recently witnessed what I think is probably the biggest disaster I have seen in a corporate space for a very, very long time. These things you cannot make up. So the very large organization had brought in an expert consultant. This expert consultant was not given parameters within which to operate. And the consultant went in like a wrecking ball. I hear Miley Cyrus's song playing in my mind when I think about this person, because this person left a wake wherever they went. Now, they said the right stuff. The emails were written so well. It was written by a Harvard expert. But the way that people felt when they left
Mm.
was a disaster, to the
Yeah.
extent that they cut this person's contract short. However, and this speaks so clearly to leadership, the leadership did not articulate and was not courageous enough to say, look, this is not a culture fit because we do things in a
Mm.
certain way. We take people on the journey. Instead, the leadership told the contractor, we just can't afford you anymore.
Shame.
Now, that by every standard is the worst thing they could have done, because now this person is posting all over LinkedIn about how fantastic they are and what a phenomenal time they had and what a great person they are and how this organization just loved them, but they couldn't afford them anymore. And everyone else is watching from the outside, laughing at this person and going, oh, no, you misunderstood. We asked you to leave because we didn't want you to leave. Now, what does that have to do with communication? We have to be brave enough, and you've said it a little bit earlier on, we have to be brave enough to call out the things that need to be addressed. We cannot, as leaders, allow people to go on a journey, to go on a road and think a certain thing and not give them open feedback. There is a way in which you can communicate open feedback without that person thinking that you've destroyed them. It is the way in which we say it. And then once we communicate, and that's why you prefer doing voice notes, because you care about how people read it, you care about how they receive it. And when they hear the voice note, they go, oh, okay. Whereas potentially they would read it and go, oh, I'm in trouble. That's not the case. That was never the case. But because of the way it was conveyed, they feel a certain way.
Yeah.
So when it comes to communication, it's not just what we say. It's not just putting a sentence together that sounds good.
Yeah.
It's thinking about how people feel as a result of that. And the same, by the way, is true for our customers. We have to think about how our customers feel when they read our communication, when they read the email, when they read our ad. How does that make them feel? Because it's the feeling that we connect with that determines whether or not I stay and help you, that I work with you, or that I buy from you. So true.
There's so many things running through my mind right now. That's just shocking. That's really, really terrible. Disney University got this thing. They've got on stage, off stage. And they speak about, good show, bad show. That's definitely bad show, terrible show. I normally ask leaders and people this question, what are you building? What are you building? Because everything that you do is building. Everything that you do is creating some form of a culture, some form of a behavior. And exactly to your point, they have communicated, to the industry, a terrible stance on leadership, because that person is going to continue thinking he did a good job. And he's going to treat everybody else like that, and maybe even worse, because now he's thinking my directness and the way that I did it was great, so I got to do more of that. We both know Dr. Nikki van der Westhuizen, and he says something very, very powerful. He says, don't remove my spirit from my words. In relaying the message that I've given you, and I mean, he's a pastor of a very large church in South Africa. So he's got leaders and people underneath him and pastors. And he always says to us, he says, don't remove my spirit from my words. What does that mean?
So powerful.
It simply means that it's the way that I say something. It's the way that you're going to relay this message. It's like, Odette asked me, to lead this, session today because she's, on leave. The way that I relay that message can either, keep your spirit or keep the attitude or remove it. What I did, she asked me to lead the session today, because she's on leave again. A lot different, a lot different than the way it was intended, and so, the way that we communicate as leaders is important. I tell you, it's almost like, Morris said, that is not said. It's the way that it's being said. It's
100%.
attitude behind it. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we got to be careful. You spoke earlier about raising kids, and I think I thank God for our son, because I know he's going to teach me so much, and not just teach me so much, but I'm going to realize all the things I'm doing wrong. Because if he starts doing that behavior, I'm going to realize, like, I wonder where he learned that. There's only one person or two people that probably learned it. So, the way that we can lead, as leaders, is really, really, it's vitally important,
Yes.
I think I just want to maybe just add this, is that, once again, I want to be clear, as we're simply speaking about, how do I develop my capacity as a leader? If you're a leader that, you communicate verbally, for instance, and you're very direct, and you're not very focused on emotional intelligence, and, that's just the type of person that you are, great. I'm not saying that you need to change. Everybody is different. So it's not like you gotta totally change who you are. No, be who you are. Just be considerate that there are things that you can do to increase your capacity to lead people. I mean, Elon Musk, if you look at him, he's a very, strong leader, and, high expectations. He would do terribly if he tries and be like a John Maxwell, where, everybody is my friend, whatever works for you, that's great. It's just to sharpen. It's just to work on those aspects, our blind spots. I hope it makes sense. I hope it's clear, defining your capacity and knowing who you are as a leader. Use these questions to sharpen more than change everything about you.
So if you've missed the first part of this show, or you're taking notes, here are the key takeaways. Be curious. Be curious about who you are and how you impact people. Ask lots of questions, because people will tell you if you ask them sincerely, and then be okay with the feedback that you receive. Because it is feedback, we get to choose whether or not we take it on board. And I think what you just said is we don't have to change who we are. I think it's important that we understand how we impact people differently. I am very direct. I know that. I know there are some people who can handle me being direct. Equally, there are people who can handle less of my directness. Therefore, I change my approach. I don't change who I am. I still tell you these are the things that need to happen, but I do it in a different way, so that the message that you receive is received in the way in which I want it to be received. So exactly what Dr. Nikki says, don't remove my spirit from the words. I may change the words slightly, but the words remain, the spirit remains the same. And I still want to convey that message, but I understand my impact on people enough so that I can adjust my approach and take everyone on the journey. Because how boring would it be if we were all the same? No, thank you, sir.
Absolutely. So true. So
thank you so much, Christo, for joining us today. It was lovely chatting with you about leadership capacity. If you enjoyed this, remember to like and subscribe. We will see you on the next show. Take care.
Thank you, Odette. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.